مساء الخير, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to our session. Just a few notes before we start. الجلسة هتكون باللغة الإنجليزية فلو محتاجين ترجمة يا ريت لو تجيبوا الهيدسيت. The session will be mostly in English. We have one section that is going to be that I'm going to do in Arabic, so if you need a headset, please do so. Also, it's important to warn that during this session, we're going to be showing photographs by journalists in Gaza, and a lot of these photographs may be distressing to some people. So please, just like an important note, and I think it's also on the screen. So our session today, Dr. Lauren Walsh, is about conflict photography and whether the war in Gaza has redefined war photography. I'm going to introduce Dr. Walsh first. Dr. Walsh is a professor at New York University, where she is the founding director of the Gallatin Photojournalism Intensive. She's also the director of Lost Rolls America, a national archive of photography and memory. And in 2023, she was named a Fulbright specialist in photography and ethics. She's a leading expert in the visual coverage of conflict and crisis. She wrote a number of books, including Conversations on Conflict Photography and Shadow of Memory. She's also the co-editor of the Future of Text and Image, the Millennium Villages Project, and Macondo, Memories of the Colombian Conflict. She publishes widely and has appeared on CNN, Al Jazeera, and BBC. She holds a PhD from Columbia University. Welcome. I also want to say that I know Lauren personally. We both live in New York, and I've had the pleasure of meeting her and seeing her work. And she looks so young, but she's so accomplished. And I'm really glad to have her here today with us for this session. I think your expertise is going to be extremely helpful for what we're doing.
Thank you. And I feel privileged to be here and to be part of this conversation.
So the way that we're going to do the session is that we're going to just have a couple of questions with Lauren. And following that, we will introduce our five photographers who provided us with photos to present today. And we're going to go over these photos with commentary from the journalists themselves that they sent to us, and with comments and questions to Dr. Walsh. And at the end of the session, we're hoping to designate 10 minutes to questions and answers. So I want to start by asking you, a lot of people here may not know about conflict and war photography. I don't know that much about it myself. What's the point of war photography?
It's a great question. And I think I could start off by answering with, we're all part of a journalism conference, and the simple answer is journalists document, they report factually and truthfully, and they disseminate that information. So the point would be to keep the public informed. But I don't want to stop at the simple answer, because the photographic medium has very unique aspects to it. And one of those is that the photograph gives visual clarity and specificity that literally shows a viewer who is far away what is occurring. It provides a window into a space that we may have no access to. Photographs are also very quickly consumed. So in contrast to reading an article or listening to a podcast, the human eye scans a photograph in under a second. So that means the photojournalist can connect with their viewer very quickly. And particularly if we're talking about conflict photography, where you're looking at distressing images often, that means that the photojournalist is also connecting at a very emotional level. The emotions might be sympathy, they might be anger, they might elicit outrage. And in an ideal world, one wants to say, I'm so angry at the suffering that I'm looking at. I'm so angry at these injustices that are occurring. I want to make a change. I want this to stop. I want there to be a public outcry. I want there to be political will. I want to pressure political leaders to make this injustice end. And we all know that the reality is that rarely, if ever, happens. So one of the things that I tend to hear from the many photojournalists that I work with in conflict spaces around the world is, I witnessed, I made the pictures, I got them out into the world, and nothing changed, so I'm failing. And so then we're back to that question of what's the point of conflict photography? And to those photojournalists, I always say they are not failing. And what they are doing is that they are showing us images to enlighten us of the suffering and injustice so that it doesn't go unseen. And I say that not to state the obvious, but actually to emphasize the converse, which is when there are restrictions on media, whether it's censorship or lack of access, then there is invisibility. Then things happen in the cloak of darkness, terrible things, and we don't even know what's going on, and we don't have a visual record. So the point of conflict photography, it's to bear witness, it's to create visual documentation, it's to set the record of history, that first draft of history. And then if we think about conflict photography, it actually lives multiple lives. So something happens in a war zone and the photojournalist documents, and that's a current events news image. But photographs can work over time, and later on, that same image or a body of work may be analyzed forensically, and it might provide visual evidence that can then be taken into a courtroom to hold perpetrators accountable. So the point of conflict photography is also to achieve justice. So those are some of the aspects of why the work that we're going to look at today is critical.
Thank you very much. And before we start introducing our photographers, we decided to have the title of this session as a question. I feel that, I'll speak for myself, but I feel like many colleagues have, in the past 14 months, questioned a little bit the Western standards, the ethical standards that we've been taught, and many are saying that they've been shattered a little bit by the uniqueness of what's happening in Gaza, in the sense that we're seeing this every day. The imagery and the videos that we're seeing are intensive. The siege itself, the idea that nobody can go into Gaza and that the journalists are stuck there and they can't get out of Gaza. So I'll ask you the question, is the war in Gaza redefining war photography?
It is. And some of it is what you said. It's a level of intensity that seems unprecedented and ongoing, and in part because Gaza is such a tiny strip of land and the entirety of Gaza seems under attack. There's also the sheer number of images being created at this moment, and this isn't specific to Gaza. We could also say the war in Ukraine is doing something similar, but it is a new moment in the history of war photography, and I'm sure anyone on social media has seen images there. So the images we'll look at today have been distributed through news outlets, but you can also go on any number of social media platforms and see a whole host of other images not necessarily created by professionals, and that's new in the history of war photography. The other thing that I would add to this, and you gestured toward it, is what is going on with the journalists in Gaza. So the complete lack of access for international media, as well as what has been called a smear campaign against Palestinian journalists. And on the one hand, discrediting journalists is not new. This is straight out of an authoritarian playbook. When you want to control the narrative or silence the press, you discredit them, you undermine their work, you make it not believable. But what is going on here is that Israel is routinely labeling Palestinian journalists as terrorists. So in addition to discrediting their work, they are also trying to justify attacks against the press. The one thing I would add to this is that a traditional war has a front line and then has a space back from the front line. But when the entirety of Gaza is the front line, there is nowhere for anyone to go that is safe. There is nowhere for the journalist to go to get a break. So traditionally, if you're a photojournalist, ideally you're working with an editor, you're facing physical dangers, emotional tolls, intense stress, and you should be in very frequent contact with your editor. And if you or your editor starts to notice that this is too much for you, the editor pulls you back, right? You need a break. It is not healthy to endure this level of intensity. That is completely impossible right now in Gaza. And in addition to that, that means we have journalists, and we know this, right? We all know this in this room. We have journalists who are continuing to work at this level of intensity while also losing colleagues and loved ones. So these are various factors that I think have just redefined what is going on in the war photography landscape.
Thank you, Lauren. So I want to explain a little bit how we prepared for this session. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're two women who live in the United States, and we are here to discuss the very powerful work of Palestinian journalists. So our focus today is to make sure that they are present with us. The original plan was to actually have a photojournalist with us. Unfortunately, this did not work out. Nonetheless, we're here with their permission. We're here in a collaboration with them. And we are committed to making sure that their voices are heard, even though they are not here physically. We also realize that looking at these pictures after they've taken them, telling us the stories. I've been in touch with the journalists. They've sent me voice notes about those pictures. They've written things that they wanted shared, that this is not easy and could have an incredible toll on their mental health. So we were very careful in making sure also that we approach this with care and that the journalists were comfortable in sharing those pictures and sharing those stories. I'm going to start by introducing our photojournalist. We have photos today from 5 journalists. Our first photojournalist is Samar Abu Al-Auf. I actually know Samar from before the war. We've never met in person, but I consider her a friend. Samar is an award-winning Palestinian freelance photojournalist. She was based in Gaza. She is now evacuated. She has been a freelance photographer since 2010, working with Reuters, the New York Times, and other international outlets. Samar has documented key events in Gaza, including the Great March of Return, 2018-2019, and the 11-day war in May of 2021, which destroyed vital infrastructure and killed over 230 people, including several of her own relatives. She also covered the current constant Israeli bombardment of Gaza until her home was partially destroyed and she evacuated. Samar said this, I'm going to quote unquote, "The camera has made me a strong woman, and I will continue working and taking photos until my last breath." Her most recent work appeared in the New York Times about the injured. It's called Out of Gaza, and I highly recommend that you check it out. Next is Abdel Hakim Abu Rayash. Abdel Hakim is a young journalist. We've used a lot of his pictures. And he sent something in Arabic, so I'm going to be reading it in Arabic just to respect and preserve the way that he wanted this message given. So if you need a headset, please use it now. في ظل الظروف الصعبة التي يعيشها
Under the circumstances that the Palestinians are experiencing in Gaza, destruction, bombardment, as a photographer, Gazan living under in the genocide war, we are experiencing very bad living conditions on the land of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian journalist is suffering and experiencing double the intensity and the sufferings of the population. Journalists bear so many hard things in order to convey the message of the population before the world, who remains silent, who is a coward and not doing anything against Israeli practices, Israeli occupation practices. We have lost more than 191 journalists and media persons, and many of them we lost them in the Israeli prisons and under the extremely difficult conditions. I'm writing this letter as I am hungry and I'm starving because it's very hard to access food or even bread for our families, which adds to the tension. I will continue to disclose the Israeli crimes despite the price. This is a promise to God and to every free person. The Gaza journalists will be the voice of those who don't have voice and will continue to convey the voice to the free world. They would not smash our cameras, the lenses of our cameras, nor our pens.
Our next photojournalist is Saher Al-Ghurra. Saher Al-Ghurra is a freelance photojournalist based in Gaza. He was born in 1997, graduated in media and public relations from Palestine University, His passion for photography began in 2017 when his father gifted him his first camera. Seher started his career by capturing street life and daily scenes in Gaza. In 2021, he began working as a freelance photojournalist and has contributed to international outlets like The Guardian, Time Magazine, The Washington Post, and The Telegraph. Seher says the following: "I had a dream to be a photojournalist with an impact on international platforms through my images." During the October 7th war, he immediately headed to the front lines. "I woke up to the sound of rockets being fired, and without hesitation, I changed my clothes, grabbed my equipment, and went to cover the war. I left my house at 7:30 a.m. on October 7th, and I have not returned since." After a week of the war, Seher and his family were displaced to Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, where he continued his coverage. His work has earned multiple awards, including the Lucy Impact Award, the POI International Award, the Prix Bayeux Award. His photographs were selected as some of the top 100 images of 2023 by Time, CNN, The Washington Post. Seher continues to actively cover events in Gaza. Dua El-Baz is a freelance journalist based in Gaza. Aged 30, she has been working independently since 2018. Dua is always on the ground, driven by the belief that as a journalist, she must be human first before capturing any image. Many of her photos have been heart-wrenching and difficult to take, with some moments left undocumented to preserve human dignity. This current war in Gaza, however, is unlike any she has witnessed or captured before, and she feels that it's essential for the world to understand what Gaza is enduring. And last, but definitely not least, because Fatma Hassouna is in the north of Gaza, which is experiencing a lot of difficulty to be a journalist in the north with the current intensive attacks. Fatma is a writer and photographer from northern Gaza. She holds a degree in multimedia from the University College of Applied Sciences and works as a photographer and storyteller for Untold Palestine. Fatma also facilitates creative writing for Tamer Institute for Community Education. Her work has been featured in exhibitions in Egypt, Jordan, Europe, and Colombia, including the SAFE exhibition with Restless Development and the World Health Organizations. Her photos have been published in The Guardian, and her story as a photographer from Gaza was shared by Plan International. And now the photos, and I'm gonna just repeat the warning again that the photos will be distressing to some. But we're going to start doing this by displaying the photos. We're going to start with one photo by Samar, and then after that, we'll do the photos in batches, and Lauren will comment, and I'll read some of the stuff that the journalists have sent us. So this is our first photo. It's a photo by Samar Abul Auf. This was taken on October 7th by Samar. She went to a school, and she was standing and talking to a group of kids, and then they heard a bombardment, and they looked up, and that's when Samar took this picture. She says, "I was just talking to them, and we were laughing, and suddenly there was a loud bombing, one of the first bombardments, and they had been already displaced in the school."
So what I want to say about this one, and I'm speaking from the perspective of a professional who is constantly working with photographers in conflict zones as an ethics advisor, as a photo editor, and as a safety trainer, is you look at a picture like this, and it doesn't immediately announce the details and the setting. And so for photojournalism, and especially with a photograph like this, the caption is critical. So I just want to remind everyone that every photojournalist isn't just giving us pictures, they're giving us words and context as well.
Thank you. Our next set of pictures is about the scale of the destruction. And we have two pictures by Abdel Hakim Abu Rayash. This is a picture in Jabalia refugee camp. A man was sitting on the debris after a strike on Jabalia. And this picture is in Khan Yunis, where displaced people were returning to Khan Yunis after the withdrawal of the Israeli army and the widespread destruction in the area.
So these kinds of pictures are very important. Photojournalists are tasked with documenting the full context, and that means getting up close and showing intimate stories. It means pulling back and giving you a bird's eye view. It means thinking through the many different aspects of a conflict. And without photos like this, the outside world is not going to understand the scope of destruction occurring.
Our next set of pictures, 2 pictures by Seher and Abdul Hakim about starvation. This picture is by Seher, and this is what he had to say about it. I was deeply affected by the screams of children and women and their pushing in the line for food. I felt that this war is not their war. Why is this happening to them? And this picture by Abdul Hakim Abu Rayyash, the caption is, a Palestinian girl cries while trying to receive a meal in Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip.
And with these 2 images, I'm going to reiterate that the task of the photojournalist isn't solely to carry a camera, but to understand the entire news story and to show it to us in pictures. So starvation is part of the story. What we're also going to see throughout this selection of images that were chosen by the photojournalists themselves is a real emphasis on the civilian toll.
Our next set of pictures is about rescue, and we have 3 pictures by Abdul Hakim Abu Rayyash. A Palestinian girl emerges from the rubble alive after the Israeli warplanes bombed an entire residential square in Jabalia refugee camp in the northern Gaza Strip, killing 30 people. And Lauren, if at any point you want to comment on a picture before I go through all of them, please.
I'm going to respond to this one. This is something I'm going to say about a number of the images that come up, but we're obviously in a horrific moment here, and the photojournalist has to strategize not only the picture, but the composition of the picture, and the fact of the 2 men framing the child and a pair of hands going right towards her. Those hands are leading our eye right to where it needs to go to see the child. The proximity of the photojournalist to the child also behind the scenes tells me a number of things, that the photojournalist is there and not in the way, there with the permission of these rescuers, and is very close to what is happening.
A Palestinian citizen trying to retrieve a child who was killed from under the rubble of a house belonging to the Haboush family in Gaza City after a number of people were killed and injured in the bombing. And I just want to clarify that what I'm reading is actually what was sent, the exact language that was sent to us by the journalists.
So for an image like this, again, the photojournalist is very close to what is happening. In Western media, it is not common to see extreme graphic kind of gore and blood, and yet to document a war and to not show death is unthinkable. And so the photojournalist has to find ways to take pictures of death that can run in media, and this is one way to do it. The child, we can see that it's a child by the size of their legs. We can't identify the child.
The next one, I don't have a caption for this one, Lauren, so if you have any comments to...
I mean, I think it's just another piece of like showing the plurality or multiplicity of what rescue and recovery looks like.
Our next set of pictures are about grief, and these pictures are quite powerful. Our first picture is by Dua El-Baz. A child cries as she says goodbye to her mother, who was killed by Israel in Khan Yunis.
So what I will say about this, and on the one hand, it sounds very uncomfortable for me to talk about the aesthetics or the framing of an image like this, but it is what photojournalists are thinking about. At a certain point, it becomes an unconscious thinking. They just know how to create strong pictures. So the fact of the photojournalist, if you think about it, has crouched down. They're not standing up and taking a picture downward onto the child. They've gone down to the child's level so that your eye goes right to her. And they've zoomed in enough to allow the 2 women on the right and the left to frame the child, so that we must confront this child. We must take in her grief.
This picture is by Seher Al-Ghurra, and this is what he said. This man hugged his brother's body for more than half an hour. He was shaking and saying, "Why did you leave me? How can I live without you?"
For an image like this, statistics are very, very important. We need to know how many people are being killed, but statistics don't often humanize and personalize. And an image like this can take a number of 40,000 deaths and distill it down to 1. Like, this is what happens with death.
This is a picture by Fatma Hassouna, and she sent her message in a voice note. She says, "This is a picture of the mother and sister of someone who was killed. It was the first time that I see a family bidding farewell to a loved one, so it was difficult for me. I'm trying to show the emotions of a mother who lost her child. This is the picture that shows loss. It was in Al-Ma'madani Hospital."
The only thing I'll add to this is I'm really appreciative of the photojournalist's words. It is extremely difficult to document people who are grieving, and the photojournalist has the job of documenting nevertheless. I'll also point out, and I'll come back to it later, you can see 2 cell phones in this picture. That suggests that it is not just the photojournalist, but everyone feels that documentation is important.
Can we stop for a second and maybe talk a little bit about this? Like, if we take a step back and say, like, what does, like, you know, the ethical standards before Gaza are about doing this, about like someone grieving? Do you take their permission, or do you take the picture without their permission? And
in a lot of cases where I've worked with photographers in conflict zones, the pictures to an outsider can feel very uncomfortable. It feels like an invasion of privacy, and almost always the survivors of loss and death want the pictures created, right? This is not an accident where somebody tripped and hit their head and died. These are political deaths, and they should be shown to the world. That said, if you're in a situation and there is a family and they make it clear to you that they don't want their picture taken, most photojournalists will put down the camera and give them space.
this picture is by Dua Elbaz, and that's what she said. After 11 years of marriage, hope, suffering, and prayers, Palestinian Rania Abu Anza, 35, gave birth to twins and dreamed of dressing her babies in new clothes on their first Eid, the Eid holiday. But Israel killed her twins, her husband, her sister, and a number of her family members in the bombing of their house in Rafah.
The only thing I'll add here is I find this a very quiet, and something in its quietude is what's devastating. The photographer is thinking about light and is moving into a space so that the light is falling on the mother and her children. And but for a little bit of blood on one of her babies, you might not even know that they're dead. The caption makes this a completely devastating image.
This image is by Abdel Hakim Abu Rayash. Palestinian woman cries while hugging her injured daughter at the Baptist Hospital in Gaza City.
So I can talk again about framing and composition. The photographer has crouched down so that our eyes go right to the mother and child where we need our attention to land. It's framed by 2 women on the right and the left. But I'm also going to ask us to think about the space where the photojournalist is working. This is a hospital, so there's chaos, there's crying, there's screaming, and the photojournalist has to nevertheless kind of think through the situation. The photojournalist is also thinking about how do I do this without getting in anyone's way, and how do I do this, in terms of what you were asking before, ethically, right? If people don't want me taking the picture, I have to move out of the way.
Our next section is probably the heaviest and has the most pictures. I'm going to start with this one by Abdel Hakim Abu Rayash. A man is holding his son who was killed after Israeli artillery shelled the school for displaced people in Al-Maghazi refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip.
And this, again, I can just say, goes to the point that I was making before, that Western media is not liable to run very, very graphic images, so the photojournalist also has to find the visuals that convey death and can get published.
Maybe we can also talk about this at the end of this, about like what is, like what certain media outlets, what would they publish and not publish, and how does this affect the decision to take a picture?
Because there are different standards around the world,
This is a picture by Samar Abu Al-Auf. A woman is bidding farewell to her sister who was pregnant and relatives in Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah.
This is a picture that takes you inside one personal experience, and the way that Samar has framed it shows you the scope of death. It wasn't just one woman.
Now, this next picture, we're going to spend some time here because there is a story behind it that is very personally and intimately connected to Samar. And she sent me a long voice note. I've translated some of it, and I'm going to share it with you. This boy's name is Khalid Juda. That's what Samar said. As for Khalid Juda, when I entered Al-Aqsa Hospital that day to take photos for the first time in my life, I saw 150 to 200 corpses on the floor. I mean, it was all white. The whole floor was covered with corpses. And I felt it was very difficult to see these people and think that these are people like me. They had dreams and aspirations. Then I heard Khalid screaming. His whole family was crying. I got close to them. Before I took pictures, I was trying to listen to what he was saying. He was walking around, looking for his mother, moving between the bodies. I was taking the pictures while crying. I was very moved by him and his voice. It was heartbreaking. And the voice of his uncle saying, "This is your mother, this is your sister." It was very hard to see a child opening every coffin on the floor and kissing his mother, kissing his sister. These were Samar's words. A few days later, she wanted to see Khalid again and take more photographs of him. So with the difficulties in communications and everything, she was able to find him, and she went and she saw him. And she found out that he had a surviving brother. I was happy that he had a living brother, but I was saddened that they lost their mother, father, and sister. She went to this hospital where the brother was getting treated, and she saw Khalid, and she asked him, "Is there anything I can get you? What would you like?" And he was shy at first, he said, like, "Whatever you want." And then he asked her for chocolate. So Samar decided to get him chocolate and some toys, and she couldn't find except for sugar-free chocolate. So she said, okay, she got the sugar-free chocolate, and she tried to find the uncle again in order to be able to give this to Khalid. And she had to meet him somewhere to give him the stuff, but she didn't see Khalid again. And then afterwards, Samar was in Qatar. She is in Qatar now, and she's in Qatar, and there was a relative of Khalid, and she asked, "How is Khalid?" And the relative told her that Khalid had been killed. And it's affected Samar enormously because she felt like a strong connection with Khalid. She says, "I can't forget Khalid's voice." And she wrote about it actually in the New York Times. And I'll say one last thing about this that she told me. When I take photos, I feel like the people fill inside me and with me. Every photo I take, I feel like it's a piece of me.
What I'll add here, although I think I can't say anything better than Samar, is sometimes there's an outside perception, like outside the industry or outside the country, that photojournalists are kind of snapping these pictures and moving on. And by and large, that is not true. You can hear from Samar, I believe in the quote, she even identified him as like her family and continued to follow up with him. And the emotional tolls this takes on journalists is enormous.
This is a picture by Samar as well. And this is journalist Muhammad Lalul holding one of his 4 children who were killed in an airstrike on his home. Only one of his children survived, a boy called Adam, who is now 2 years old. Samar says this was one of the most difficult moments, knowing how he worked to cover such airstrikes as a journalist only one day while in the field to get the news that his own family had been killed.
So Samara is the photographer, and you know that she's on one side of the car, and you can look through and see 2 cell phones and a press photographer's camera on the other side. This again is emphasizing the need and the desire to create documentation. This also goes to the point that I was making earlier, that the photojournalists, they're not just going into a war zone and putting their own lives at risk. It's their families and their colleagues. It's everyone.
And our last section is about the journalists documenting the killing and the attacks on their colleagues. This photo is by Sahir al-Ghurra, journalist at Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah, paid farewell to journalist Salim Abu Tuyur, who was killed with his son when his home in Nusayrat was bombed. And this one is by Dua al-Baz, the funeral of Saeed al-Tawil and Muhammad Subh, 2 journalists who were killed on October 10th.
I mean, we know that the media death toll in this war has been higher than in any other war. And although 14 months seems extremely long, it's also, it's not enough time for the level of death that has occurred. And I think that these kinds of images are very important because the previous images, most of them were showing us the devastation inside Gaza and the destruction on civilians, but the press is also suffering enormously and continuing to work to create the vital documentation.
All right, thank you very much, Lauren. We'll take some questions. If anyone here in the room would like to ask any questions, please let us know. Yes.
Thank you very much for this amazing presentation. I believe we were all touched by every single photo. However, I wanted to point out one particular photo by Samar, just the one before the last, where the journalist holding his child. And yes, this one exactly. You see members of the press holding their cameras to document, but there is one particular one who chose to put his arm on the journalist. And I think this is probably the most difficult decision in situations like these, where you have to choose sometimes between documentation and showing the sympathy and support. I just felt that that deserves a note. I don't know how relevant that is, but I would like to hear from you, Lauren, on that.
I think it's hugely relevant. Thank you for saying that. One of the questions that I get frequently with people asking me about conflict photography is, does the photographer ever put down the camera in order to help or assist or provide sympathy? And in many cases, yes. Most of the photojournalists I work with will say, I'm a human first, I am a media worker second. If there is something that I can do that will save a life or comfort a life, I will do that. So thank you so much for pointing that out.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, yes. Hi, thank you. I think it was very important what you were, this session very important. But I want to answer this question of why certain media, unfortunately, don't take the pictures that we just saw now. And this is the biggest problem, the way they view us as Palestinians, the demonization of a Palestinian. We're not a human. When they humanize us and we're a human, doesn't fit with the profile. They see things black and white, the good guys and the bad guys. History started on the 7th of October. And we know that this is not happening. It is intentionally. So we know the consequences. We're not naive like we used to be maybe in the past to understand why these pictures are not there. And why these pictures, we don't see it in the US, why we don't see it in social media, why you don't see this on the mainstream media. What else that we need to explain to the world that they need to see this? And not only see this, but act and do something and take a stand. If this was in Ukraine or somewhere else white in the world, this can't continue a genocide. So I think that just to think about these questions.
Yeah. It's an important question.
But we understand that the editors-in-chief and others, that they will think 100 times before publishing pictures of Palestinians.
Thank you very much. I think that it's, Lauren, because we have Ukraine as like a recent example, when it comes, because we're discussing photos here, the photo editors, do you see a difference in the kind of photos that like they would publish with regards to Ukraine versus like some of the photos?
I mean, a number of these images have been published in American media, but that you're absolutely correct that there is a different treatment of different conflicts. And this is part of what I was saying at the beginning, this kind of concerted smear campaign to discredit Palestinian journalists. In terms of the kinds of pictures, I certainly think that Yes, we were seeing a lot more of the sympathetic pictures out of Ukraine in the beginning, and even the language that gets connected to pictures can influence very much how a viewer responds to them. So I think it's not solely the images, we should also pressure the language that houses the image in a context.
Thank you, Lauren. Yes, right, go ahead.
Shukran, Yehuda. Thank you very much. I see pictures all the time, you know, and I was really touched, Huda, by the captions from the actual journalists and by your commentary, Lauren. It makes it more special and you understand. But I think the story would not still be complete without, when things settle, we go back to the journalists with each of those pictures and ask them how they feel about it and what context was missed in the moment. Because, you know, when we're taking the picture and reflecting, even if we write the caption, we're still missing something. There's a lot to be told. And I would love to suggest to you and anybody who works there to follow up with them and to complete the story about those pictures at one point. That's number one. Number two, Layla, you got this thing. I was thinking, there's so many aspects of these pictures that different eyes can see it differently and they can humanize it differently. You don't need to be a journalist. You need just to be a human. Can also, Huda, I suggest that we have a sort of online exhibition where a picture is without any caption. And we invite people to write their own captions. And we collect that and we humanize and honor every single picture of those. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wright, for your questions and your suggestions. Lauren?
I think those are great suggestions. I'm an enormous advocate for bringing the voice of photojournalists into a much more public space, and I've written entire books where I work to do that. So I really love the idea, and I love that we have the voice of the photojournalists. We couldn't have them on the stage with us, but this is a collaboration of 7 people.
And let's talk a little bit. Oh, sorry, there's a question. If there's a question, then we take the question, of course. Yes.
Sure. A lot of things that were missing in the photos today were not just photos of victims, because this has been, whenever Palestine is covered, it's covered as the victims, the losing side. But there was a lot of images of resilience, of victory, of resistance, of fighting. Not all of them, actually, many of them were not shot by the journalists themselves. And a lot of them were posted online as videos and photos. So I have 2 questions here for you, because a lot of these photos were filtered, were blocked, were removed, or at least, if you're lucky, you'll get a warning on them, and then you have to do several clicks to see them. So one of the things that many activists online, many journalists online, what they were doing, they were actually creating AI images that represented some of these photos, whether they were victims or they were images of defiance and resistance and power and victory. But creating them as images, of course, that are fake, but represented the gist, the spirit of what was taken. So my 2 questions for you is, what has been represented in mainstream US and Western media about these missing images of defiance, of victory, of resilience? And at the same time, what do you think of these AI images that are, I heard one lecturer once in Germany say, oh, these are fake, these are not true, but they are representative of true images, and the main purpose of them was to filter through the blockage so that if it's too bloody, they don't get the warning, or if it's too victorious for the Palestinians, they don't get totally blocked and eliminated.
Very important. Thank you very much, Red.
So the one thing I'll say is we left the selection of the images to the photojournalists. So we didn't curate their work, they did it. That said, I think your point is very well made, that the images of resilience or heroicism are not appearing, and that may go to the question that we got as the second question, right? Like, why are we not seeing the same sorts of images? And that is different from, you asked about Ukraine, that's different, right? We do see those images there, and that is something that we absolutely have to demand that it changes. In terms of AI, I perfectly understand it as an activism that pushes back against a curated narrative coming out of American or Western media, and we should do that. The point at which I get slightly hesitant is if an AI image isn't readily labeled as an AI image, because I guess coming from the photojournalistic space, I want a level of authenticity connected to the image so that the images, the photographs, aren't open to being discredited. So I think AI is not the death of photojournalism, but needs to be labeled as such.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Walsh. Thanks to everyone for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.